Hi everybody, this is a video about my mom. I had already filmed on nearly this whole thing once, but while I was doing it, I spilled a bottle of water, and I just got done cleaning up a messy desk. It was not pretty. At least it didn't spill into my keyboard. That would have really torqued me off. But I did get the card all wet that Tammy made me, so I have it drying out. Although it'll be in a vlog tomorrow because I did record a vlog earlier to put up tomorrow. So I'll be in the same shirt even though, yeah, whatever. Okay, my mom. Let's see, it all started in about 2003, 2004, I would say. She started gaining a lot of weight, and she got really hard. Her skin, her stomach was real hard. And I'm like, Mom, it's not normal. Look at me, I'm big, but I'm gushy. You're just like a rock. She started drinking a lot of water and ice, and we finally got her to go to the doctor, and she was retaining water, and they put her on a water pill, and it kind of spiraled out of control. I mean, she had so much water in her body, it would seep out of her legs, and they had to wrap them, and she started to not make sense. I remember I said, Dad, we gotta get her, she's gotta go to the hospital or something. So she had an appointment with a doctor just down the road from the house. I can't remember what kind of doctor he was. But while she was there, he said she needs to go to the hospital. So they went to the hospital, and she tanked out rather quickly at that time. Her liver function and her kidney function because of her liver function. Kidneys are very delicate, though. They'll freak out on you. And she ended up being put into a medical coma in critical care. She was put on a very slow dialysis, and all this stuff was happening, and a bunch of us were at the hospital, and that it got to the point one day where, we were coming home from the hospital. We'd been home for a little while, and we were called and said that, we don't know if she's going to survive tonight. And so we made a bunch of phone calls, and we were all at the hospital. And about 11 o'clock that night, a doctor came in, a specialist that they'd gotten in there to see her, and he's like, can I see the Humphreys family? And we're like, we're it. There's like 25 of us in that room, because I have a very close-knit family. And the first question that he said was, is she a drinker? Immediately I knew it was something with the liver. And my dad's like, well, if you consider like a wine cooler every year a drinker, then yeah. And he's like, then she has a cirrhosis that we don't understand how they get it. It's like, if you're not a drinker and you have cirrhosis, they don't understand it. They don't know what causes it. So they had kept her in a coma for about a week. And after that, she never remembered any of that. They had her on a very slow dialysis. They took almost 100 pounds of water off of her, and she ended up having to stay on dialysis for 2 or 3 months after she got out of the hospital. And then she was taken off, and she had these tubes here for dialysis, and when she got those out, she was so happy. She hated having those tubes there because she couldn't wear a bra because it hurt right where they were the bra strap came down, and she was so happy to get those taken out. And then all was pretty well after that. She had to be monitored quite closely. She was put into a program at Northwestern Hospital in Chicago called the Pre-Liver Transplant Program, where every 6 months she would go and get different tests that they needed to keep a good file on her liver function and stuff. So there ever came a day that she would need a transplant because her liver would never get better, it would only get worse. That she would be higher on the list because she, did the program. And so she kept up on that, And my dad hated going to Chicago. He'd always get so tense when it came time. He goes, I'd rather sit in jail for the day than drive, because her hospital was right downtown. And I never realized Dad meant right downtown until the day she passed away. But, so there from 2004 to 2008, things were pretty good. She had a few small incidences of having to go in the hospital. She took this medicine, it was like a syrupy stuff that made her liver process stuff like it's supposed to, but it also made it to where you never had a regular poo anymore. It was always real soft, watery stuff. And she hated it, but that she had to do it, and she would get in moods where she wouldn't take the medicine for a few days, and we would have to get on her because my mom was stubborn. 2008, they go on vacation in March, end of March. Easter fell in March that year. They went to New Jersey with my grandma, and they followed out, the boyfriend, Larry, and his wife, and they went and spent Easter with Larry's daughter and son-in-law, who were in the Air Force. And then after Easter, Mom and Dad and Grandma left and went to Georgia, and they went up and spent a day in Chattanooga and went to the aquarium and all that good stuff. And when they got home, it was that first week of April, and Mom had a little bit of a cold, which she passed to me and Dad, and I didn't feel good for a couple days, and well, she started to feel better, but then she started complaining about a pain in her inner thigh, and it got worse. And what really alarmed me was one day she laid in Dad's recliner all day and was asleep, and I said, Dad, something's not right. She hasn't gotten up all day to use the restroom at all. That means her kidneys aren't working. And I said, Mom, what? I said, you haven't been to the bathroom? Yes, I have. And I knew she had. And she started to not make sense. And so I'm like, you need to get up and go into the restroom. And she tried to get up, and her leg, it was just a mess. So Dad and I pretty much walked her to the bathroom. And the pain in her leg was so bad that her knees kept buckling, and we were holding her up, and I'm like, I'm going to call 911. She's like, no, I just want to lay on the couch. If you lay me on the couch, I'll be fine. The doctor pretty much told us after the fact that if we would have done that, we probably would have woke up and she would have been dead, pretty much, at that time. And so I yelled, screamed in the hallway right behind her, I am calling 911. And let me tell you, it was not pretty. We sat her in a chair in the kitchen, and she could barely do it because her leg hurt so bad. But what we found out was she had that flesh-eating fasciitis. The infection of that was affecting her liver and the functions of it inside of her. And they took her in for emergency surgery the next morning at the hospital, and they cut out a section of her inner thigh like that, and packed it. And but that infection was too much for her liver to handle, and it wasn't bouncing back. They got the infection out of her leg, and the wound was looking really good. And she was aware of what was going on, which they were happy about, because it could have caused a lot of brain functioning problems. They had her intubated so she couldn't talk. Whenever we went in to see her, we had to put on gowns and gloves. She was in she couldn't have anything brought in there because of the wound. And we can only go in for very short periods of time. She was kind of in isolation. And she knew when you were talking to her, and Dad would always say, are you in pain? And she would say no. And they asked her questions, and the doctors would come in and talk to her, and the nurses would talk to her and get answers. And, but the bilirubin in her liver kept going up and wouldn't stop. So that was a number we had to focus on. It just wouldn't stop going up, and the higher it got, the closer to transplant level you get. And so we called, well, we didn't call, the hospital that she was at called Chicago and said, can she come there? And at first they denied her because she had an infection, and they cannot do a transplant when she already has an infection in her. But like 2 days later, the wound was infection free, and she was looking a lot better. And they finally, Northwestern, said, we'll take her to see what we can do, because they had done all that they could do here. They couldn't do anything else for her. And so they wanted to take a helicopter and chopper her over, but they did not have, they couldn't. I don't know why. I don't think they had a landing spot at one of the hospitals. So they took her in an ambulance to Chicago, which is about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, depends on the traffic. Although in an ambulance, I'm sure they can get there quicker than the average Joe. So they told me and Dad to go home, and they were going to do it in the middle of the night. And then they said for Dad to come in the morning. So in the morning, Dad went, and I went to work. And then he spent the night at my cousin's, and the next morning I got a call, because I was going to go over on the weekend, and it was my Aunt Linda saying, your mom had a bad night. And I said, oh, I'm going to call Dad. So I called Dad, and he was crying, and he goes, it's not looking good. You need to come now. So my Uncle Joe said, I will go with you, but he was so sick with cancer at that time, it would have been hard on him, but he was willing to go with me. And I said, I think my cousin Roy will go. And he's like, well, if he'll go, then I'll stay home. Because, my Uncle Joe died just a few months after my mom. So me and Roy took off and got to my cousin's house and picked up my dad. And we went in, my mom had a, what kind of vehicle is that? Trailblazer. Something. And I rode in that, and in the back seat, because I was not driving into downtown Chicago. My cousins live in a little suburb. And let me tell you, it's right downtown Chicago. We were parked on the 10th floor of the parking garage, and we got in there, and they took us to a meeting room in the critical care unit where my mom was. And we go in there, and it's a room with a table, and it's full of a huge team of doctors talking to us. It was the transplant team people, and critical care people, and this people, and that people, and they're sitting there talking to us about different things, how she had a bad night, and stuff was happening. And in walks a guy and whispers into the lead surgeon on the transplant team. It was a woman doctor. And the guy comes and whispers in her ear. And I just saw her deflate. And she turns and whispers into the doctor's ear next to her. And he shook his head, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. And the guy who came in was a gastroenterologist. I can never say that word. And they had just scoped her, and her stomach and intestines were dead. She was dying from the inside out, and there was nothing that they could do anymore. And I looked at my dad, and I said, we have to unplug her. We have to just unplug her. I walked down, and I kind of wish I hadn't, because I was not prepared for how truly horrible she looked. Yeah, it was not good. It wasn't good. And so, we went back to that meeting room and sat there. And after they unplugged her, I need a drink. I was thankful that it only took 20 minutes for her to pass away, because I could not handle her living for hours or days, or, you know. She was ready. So, she was 56. Yeah, it was not a good day. About this time, we were just getting home from Chicago. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go now. Bye.